In the Middle Ages, baking, especially the making of bread, was more than just a way to create a staple foodstuff to feed the masses. Bakers were an essential part of the social and cultural lives of the medievals, and were well-respected members of their community. In his Colloquy, which he wrote to help students learn Latin, the Anglo-Saxon monk and prolific writer Aelfric of Eynsham pointed out the special talent that it took to follow the profession when he wrote about a baker who said, quote, "You can live a long time without my skills, but you cannot live well without them." Today we continue our Day in the Life series and travel back in time to meet one of these medieval bakers and see what his life was like. So you think you know everything about knights, castles and kings? Well, hold on to your chainmail because we're starting a history channel all about the Roman Empire. Now I know what you're thinking, wait, Roman Empire, isn't that before my favourite medieval legends? Well, yes, but stick with me. Rome is where it all started. From the fall of the mighty empire to the rise of your medieval knights, it's a story that's all connected. So if you're ready to learn about this incredible time period, join the toga party over at our new channel, The Roman Empire. It's going to be totally worth the detour in your historical journey, so I'll leave a link to it in the description below. And now for today's video, welcome to Medieval Madness. Don't be messing with my bread. It was almost impossible for a housewife to bake in her own home. It was difficult to grind up the grain into flour in small batches, and in the countryside the lord of the manor would almost always insist that she pay a licensed miller to do it for her. In both the villages and towns, even if a woman had the bread dough ready to go, she would then need to find an oven. Now, ovens were rare in the Middle Ages. Their construction for commercial use was expensive and regulated, so they were generally only found in wealthier households and specialized bakery, where permission had been granted. In 1267, King Henry II of England pronounced the assize of bread and ale. This law subjected all bakers and brewers to regulations regarding their price, weight, and the quality of their produce. A scale was used between the prices of wheat and bread so that the cost of a small loaf, like our modern bread rolls, could go up or down accordingly. The size and weight of bread were controlled along with ingredients used, and random inspections would be carried out regularly. It was also common for the monarchy to make bakers sell bread at a rate below the market value during times of famine, so that the people would not starve. The fining of bakers and backsters, female bakers, for selling underweight loaves is likely what led to the term a baker's dozen, as bakers gave an extra loaf to customers to ensure they did not violate the law. Bread of life. During the Middle Ages, bread was more than just a staple foodstuff in Catholic Europe. The Eucharist, also known as the Holy Communion, is a sacrament that Christians still use today. It incorporates bread and wine to symbolize the body and blood of Christ. This and other religious festivals helped to elevate bakers in their communities, and their guilds often played a central role in festivals and celebrations. In May every year, the Bread Festival, or Feast of Saint Honoré, the patron saint of bakers, is still celebrated across France. For the poor, bread was just as important as the gruels and porridges at mealtimes. Bread was on the dinner table of the wealthier classes, but only as a supplement, not a staple. However, it should be noted that the host and his most honored guests would be given a larger piece of bread, and they would be fresher than those given to the other diners. Theirs might be days old, as bread stood as a measure of a person's social standing. The breaking of bread with another person came to be known as a sign of trust and friendship. This, along with its role in religious ceremony and its connection to the community, gave the art of baking and the bakers themselves a social and spiritual significance within their community. The Master Baker. Now, I do actually know a thing or two about master baking. I used to do it quite a lot myself until I met my girlfriend, who now takes care of that for me. Seriously, she makes a fantastic peach cobbler. Anyway, I'd like to introduce a real-life Parisian master baker to tell us about his day-to-day life. My name is Pierre Lenemont, and I live with my family on Rue de la Jouvière in the parish of Sainte-Madeleine on the Ile de la Cité in Paris, home to the magnificent Cathedral de Notre Dame. You know what, I'm in a good mood, so I'm not going to subject you guys to my terrible French accent for the rest of the video, so just imagine that I'm a French person whilst I read this out. To become a baker in Paris, every Christmas I have to pay 10 deniers to the king for the right to sell my wares, another 22 at Easter, 5.5 at the Feast of St. John, and 6 sous at Martinmas. I am one of the wealthiest men in the Juiverie, and my bakery is very prosperous. In this year of 1292, my tax assessment came in at 70 sous. Messin of Chamont, my journeyman and right-hand man, was taxed at 3 sous as he is paid a good wage. I have several staff at the bakery, and along with my wife, we have servants to help with the running of the household. With the help of Messin, we are teaching the 2 apprentices. As a master baker, I taught Messin myself, and although he could become a master and run his own business, he's chosen to stay here and work for me. One of the apprentices is just 12, the other 16. They stay with us in the house during their training, which will last for 7 years. Just a few doors down from us is a female butcher named Beatrice. She acquired the trade after the death of her husband. However, there is no need for my wife to work in my bakery. My business is thriving, so she can stay in the living quarters and with the help of the servants, look after our 4 children as befits a woman of her standing. I have one of the widest houses on the street with a large shop front. Next to the door, we have a spacious window where the customers can come and buy our baked goods, which are on display for all to see. Above the window is a wooden canopy that protects the bread, biscuits, and pastries from the rain. Although the street is narrow and the higher stories of my house jut out so far that hardly any rain can get in anyway. And the unwelcome sun, which would just spoil my produce, is also kept out. Shutters cover the window at night and keep the premises secure. My house has a timber frame and is tall and deep, with a small yard at the back where we keep poultry and a garden to grow vegetables and herbs for the table. There are 2 stories above the shop, where I live and sleep with my family, and there is a garret at the top of the house for Messin, the apprentices and the cook and the chambermaid to sleep in. The other workers, such as the sifter and the 2 kneaders, live in their own homes in the parish and come in the early hours of the morning to work, except on Sundays and the many holy days when the shop is closed. We have a thatched roof, although ours is coated with plaster to reduce the risk of fire, and we have a cellar beneath for extra storage. The kitchen is on the ground floor and the cooks work in there to provide meals for the whole household, including the outside workers. At the back of the building are my 2 ovens. I call them Pride and Joy. Rise and grind. Messin and I get up in the middle of the night, and our first job is to light the ovens as the rest of Paris sleeps. Although I have Messin who could do this job for me, I prefer to do it myself as I like to hear the comforting sound of the wood crackling. It really sets me up for the day ahead. Once the sifter has arrived and he begins to sift the sacks of flour to remove any impurities and lumps, Messin and I can set to work by placing our ingredients, flour, yeast and salt, into large wooden bowls before adding water and mixing the dough. We add our own special blend of herbs to some of the loaves. These have medicinal properties as sanctioned by the apothecary. To others we add honey and nuts, but these are more expensive than the plain loaves, so we only make about 2 dozen. Now the dough is mixed and the kneaders can begin their work. Only an experienced baker knows when the kneading should stop and how long the loaves should be proofed for. When it is time, the apprentices can rake out the ashes from the ovens, and using the wooden paddles called peels, the loaves and other baked goods are slid into the ovens. The wooden doors are closed to seal it in the heat, and oddments of dough are placed around the edges of the door. When they dry out and drop off, then the bread is ready and it is time for the next batch. Some of the bread is baked twice until it becomes crispy and flaky, and we then sell this as biscuits. As always with baking, timing is the key, and only a lifetime of knowledge, skill and practice can provide that expertise. Cook arrives to take some of the freshly made bread into the kitchen, ready for our dinner later. She leaves some of the bread out on the table to go stale so it can be used to thicken sauces and custards, or mixed with honey and spices and made into gingerbread. Before it's baked, we always mark the dough with an impress, a baker's mark, so it can be identified as coming from my shop, and then if any of my products are found to be underweight, poor or putrid, they could be traced back to me. Of course, then I would be apprehended, tried and punished in Paris's bread courts, so I'm very careful to make sure that my stuff is the good stuff. My mark is 2 lions to represent the region of Normandy, the place of my father's birth. One baker from the next parish along was convicted of placing stone pieces inside his loaves to bring them up to the required weight. He was carried through Paris on a cart with his bread tied around his neck like a necklace of shame. Then he spent 2 days in the pillory, where people screamed at him, threw rotten food at him, and spat on him. I can only imagine the humiliation. And even worse, now he is ruined in Paris. For who will want to buy bread from such a charlatan? It would never happen to me. I run a clean, honest bakery, and my workers and many loyal customers will attest to this. As part of a guild, my trade is highly regulated. The master of all bakers often insists on inspecting the bakeries in Paris. He brings a sergeant and a group of jurors with him, and at the windows where they find bread for sale, the inspector takes the bread and gives it to the jurors, and the jurors examine it to see if it's adequate. The jurors return it to the window, and if it is not adequate, the juror puts the bread in the hand of the inspector. If he determines that the bread is not adequate, he can confiscate all the rest of it, even that which is in the oven. And if there are several types of bread in a window, the inspector will have each one assessed. And those which are found to be too small, the inspector and jurors will have them donated to charity. Despite the long hours and demands of the job, I really do enjoy being a baker. It's an important job, and I'm well respected in my community. My profession has also afforded me a comfortable life, and I am able to provide well for my family and the employees in my care. So, Pierre Lenormant was an actual baker who lived in Rue de la Juvière, a well-appointed street in Paris during the 13th century. We know that he was successful because, according to the city records, he did indeed pay his taxes of 70 sous in 1292, which is quite a substantial amount. Thomasin Chaumont is also listed in the records as his valet and was more than likely his journeyman. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Medieval Madness. I do hope you've enjoyed it, and as always, I'll see you next Friday for another video. Until then, hope everyone has an amazing week. Cheers!